Okay, hey, welcome back, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start this session with a couple of giveaways. Everybody get a ticket here? Everybody wants a ticket? If you don't win here this first session, keep those tickets. We're going to do the same thing at the next session at the beginning, too. So keep your same ticket. So Carla's going to draw a couple of numbers for me. So, Carla? You want me to read it out? Okay. Your ticket should have a number on it, so if you could find that. This is 829715. Okay, Pete. Carla will bring you a basket. Awesome. All right, one more here. Okay, this one is 829716.
Oh, that's me. It's me, really.
Was it really? Yeah. Okay. Well, Jenny, now's a good time to turn it over back to you. Hey, thank you for coming back. It was really good this morning what we talked about, and so thankful to be able to talk about this and to have Jenny with us. So as she's coming, if you'll just bow your heads, I want to just take a moment and just pray. Jesus, we thank you for this time together, and we thank you for bringing Jenny our way to be able to share what she has shared with us, and the help that is giving us, the things that we're learning. May we feel encouraged by what we are learning. May it help us to live and to live life to the full, the kind of life that you have given to each and every one of us. And I also pray that things we're learning, we'll be able to use those to help others along this journey too as well. And I ask that you just bless Jenny as she comes and shares more with us this afternoon, that you would bless the kids as they're having a great time together too. And we thank you for this time. Amen. Jenny?
Amen. All right, thank you. Okay. Well, thanks for coming back after lunch. I don't know, hopefully I can keep everybody awake, because I know like your stomachs are full and you're like sitting down. It's Sunday afternoon, so if I see you like passing out, it's okay. We'll just keep going. Okay. Oh, I could take this off. That would be nice. So used to these masks. Okay, so today we have 2 sessions, so I'm excited, and Steph back there is going to pop in whenever she wants. So we're going to be talking about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and trauma. And that's really important for some of us to kind of understand maybe some things that are happening in our adult lives, but then also what we can do to help protect our kids who come to church with us. And then also kind of expand that and look at trauma and then ways that we can respond. So we'll talk about that. Then our second session will be on just regulation, some really practical strategies that we can do that you guys can walk out of here and use for regulation. Okay? So if you have somebody around you, if you're not wanting to get around anybody, I totally get it. But just talk with a partner, shoulder partner, and just talk about what is trauma and try to provide some examples. Think about what the impact trauma can have on young people, and answer if you think trauma is stored in the body, and if so, in what way. Okay, so I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to solve these big questions. Go. Do you want to come up here? Okay. All right. Okay, I'll give you about 20 seconds. Okay. If you don't mind, just kind of wrap up your conversations. I know like this can kind of open up the door and kind of take you down this rabbit hole of conversations regarding trauma, but what do you guys think? What is trauma? Who wants to be brave and just kind of say, generally speaking, what do you think trauma is? That's pretty good, Jen. You should come up here with me. That's perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, sounds like somebody's talked about this before. Okay, what about some examples? What are some examples of trauma? Abuse. That's right, Pete. Car wreck. Abandonment, neglect, divorce, death. Yeah. Okay. Do you think that a traumatic event like a car accident, neglect, abuse, do you think that that impacts young people? I don't know. Yes. Okay. It's kind of obvious, right? But we'll talk about how that actually has this impact on kids throughout their entire life and what we can do to prevent that from happening. Okay, and then do you think an event like a car accident or something that happens externally, it's this physical event, do you think it has an impact on your internal body? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Good. Well, I'm glad we're all on the same page because that makes it a lot easier. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started and we'll kind of walk through this. So we're going to start off with ACEs. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, so these things that happen to a child from 0 to 18 that have an impact on their life from 19 to 24. And it impacts their physical, their mental, their behavioral health. But even though these ACEs happen to a child, it doesn't mean that it will absolutely have a negative effect, because there are certain things, these core protective factors that we touched on this morning, that can kind of change the trajectory of a kid's life and have a positive impact. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll kind of expand the definition of ACEs, and we'll look at trauma kind of big picture. So this is kind of our agenda. This information that I'm presenting to you today, part of it is from a relationship that I have with Beacon Community Impact with St. Joe County, and so they do this ACE interface presentation to build awareness so that people are aware, so that we can kind of change our systems and look at how we respond and support people in our community. So this is kind of an ACE interface presentation, and the presentation is supposed to be 2 hours, but I am not. You guys were like, wait, we're supposed to get out of here at 3. I will like fly through this pretty quick and kind of give you the, the brass tacks. So you go through it together. So this information is based off of a study by Dr. Anda and Dr. Vincent Folletti, and really what they were doing is just kind of doing some research, looking at people who had they were interviewing women who were overweight and looking at like health outcomes, and they accidentally asked this question, and it spurred on all of these other things. And what they found is all of these people who had these health problems as adults had this common factor, and that was they experienced adversity in childhood. And so it spurred into this big study that kind of started in 1991 and went throughout the 90s, and it was one of the biggest health studies ever done, and it included 17,000 participants. It was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente, which is an insurance group. And what's interesting about this study is that a lot of times when we think about adversity and abuse and some things like that, we might think of like a certain population. But this study showed that ACEs were common and impacted a lot of people, and in fact 2/3 of the population of the study. And so when we think of adversity in childhood, we might be shocked to know all of the things that really happen to so many people. And I think it also helps us understand behaviors and maybe why people do what they do, so that we don't take it so personally and we kind of understand a little bit of where they're coming from. So before we get into that, we'll just do a really quick overview of kind of neuroscience. And we talked about it this morning. But what happens is, your brain, your spinal cord, that makes up part of your nervous system, and your body is just always taking in all this information from your environment, like we talked about this morning. And then everything it takes in, it makes all these connections, right? And so we need those connections so that we can grow, so our brain makes all of these different adaptations based on our experiences. So if you look here, these are images of neural connections. So you can see at birth, there aren't a lot of neural connections, right? Because the baby's born, they have to eat, sleep, they bond with the caregiver. Their life is simple, right? But as we have more and more experiences, our neurons start connecting, and they make all these connections. So elementary age, about 6 years old, our neurons are having this thing called arborization. So they're branching out like trees because of all of these connections that we have. But then puberty comes, right? So look at what is different between elementary and puberty. What do you guys notice between those two? There's not a lot there, right? So you're like, what happens? Well, what happens is this pruning happens in puberty. And so our brain likes to be efficient because it's constantly taking in all this information. And so what it does is it prunes out all of the experiences that aren't common. So so then it can be much more efficient in puberty and throughout our life. So our brains go through this process. Well, this is great, it's adaptive, but the problem is, what happens is when we don't have experiences frequently that are loving, that are supportive, that are benevolent, then our brain prunes those out. And so then we're wired with the experiences that we have a lot of: chaos, abuse, neglect. And so that changes people's wiring in their brains and impacts their personality, impacts their behavior, impacts choices that they make in life. And so that's kind of the gist of the study. And so we can change that trajectory for kids so that we can help, and then it'll impact their adulthood. So this is...
Some people looked at this data and they
Nadine
said,
Brooke area.
come on, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center.
Okay, so that wasn't a great introduction. Sorry. That was Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and this is part of a larger clip. It's like 19 minutes. And so if you're interested in just hearing it a little bit more, she is an excellent speaker and really kind of digs in and talks about how adversity early in life really has an impact on brain development. And so I just want to throw that in there so that you hear it from another doctor who's done a lot of work. She wrote The Deepest Well, which is an excellent book, and just talks about how even though as an adult, maybe we have a great marriage, we go to church, we have a great family, we have a great job, but something's happening with our health that could have been a result of something that happened when we were a child, and that's because of what happens when we're a kid impacts our brain neural pathways. So, Dr. Burke-Harris. So, the issue is, I think a lot of times we think that because of wiring that happens, I grew up in this environment, and Sally grew up in this environment, and my environment was great, and hers was, rough and chaotic, and it was filled with abuse, and so her wiring is bad and mine is good. That's not the case. God can use whatever's happened to us and use how we're wired for his good. But the problem that happens is when biology, how we're wired, kind of collides with the social expectations. So we have kids who are used to chaotic environments, and then we ask them to come into church or to come into school and sit down and be quiet, and they're not wired that way. Or we have a kid who grew up in a great household and didn't have a lot of stress and things were wonderful, and then we put them in a chaotic environment like, say, COVID, and there's a lot of changes, and they can't handle that. So, there's good and bad to both, but it's really just something to keep in mind, especially as we're working with people to kind of understand maybe where they're coming from. Something else that's really important to kind of point out is there are lots of different patterns with our brain development. And so another thing that happens when we're going through adversity is if we experience adversity at different ages, that will have a different impact on our lives. So say I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us. So just an example, say when there was a traumatic event that happened, maybe my mom got arrested and in jail. That never happened, so I'm just throwing her, I'm glad she's not here right now. But anyway, pretend it did. So she, that is an adverse childhood experience. I might be okay. My sister might be okay. My brother may not be, because it impacted him when he was 7 or 13. And, so that impacts a different area of his brain. Maybe now he has difficulty with language processing. Maybe he has difficulty, making social connections. My other sister might be okay. So the trauma also is age dependent, especially depending on what sensitive period we're in with our development. And then this can follow us through when we're young. So that's kind of the background of it, okay? So now we're going to look at the ACE study, and I'll make it really fast, I promise, just so you kind of understand that's true. So like I said, this is the largest health study ever done, and it was done in the 90s, and it's been repeated over and over around the world. And they were really just looking at not just one aspect, not just abuse and then the health outcomes. They were looking at 10 aspects or 10 adverse childhood experiences and then multiple health outcomes. So this is a big, complex study. And again, 17,000 people, highly educated people. 6% of the population of people who were studied did not have a high school diploma, compared to the 13% of the population at the time. So most of these people were very well educated. They had access to the best health care. They were part of the background of that. But what they're looking at, these are the ACEs. So when I say ACEs, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So what they did is they identified 10 adverse childhood experiences, put them in 3 categories: household dysfunction, neglect, and abuse. So household dysfunction includes substance abuse, parental separation or divorce, mental illness in the home, battered mothers, and then criminal behavior, somebody involved with the court system or who's incarcerated. Neglect, emotional and physical, and then abuse, emotional, physical, or sexual. So that gives us 10 total ACEs. So you notice some of the things that we talked about: car accident, death, those things are not up here, and that's why I'm going to talk about trauma separately. So these are 10 adverse childhood experiences that are thought to be preventable, and something that could change. Like, we can't control if somebody gets in a car accident, but we can control if we abuse a child. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. So 10 total ACEs. And then the numbers there are the numbers, percentage of people in this actual study who had experienced one of those ACEs. So out of the study, the original study, you can see there's a lot of people that were involved, these 17,000 people. 33%, so about a third, had no ACEs, reported that they never experienced any of these 10 ACEs. But 2/3 of the population had experienced at least one. So 26% said, yeah, I've experienced one of those. 16% 2, 10% 3 ACEs, and then 4 more is 16. So what's interesting about this is that's really common. If you think about 2/3 of the population in the 90s experiencing ACEs, so that means 2/3 of adults, experience some kind of childhood trauma. What they also found was there's this called dose-response relationship. So the more ACEs you have, they found the more health problems that you have as an adult. So obviously you have 1 ACE, 2 ACEs, 3 ACEs, your chance for having some kind of health or mental health concern as an adult increases as the number of ACEs increase for you. So here's an example when we look at smoking and lung disease. So early smoking initiation, how old do you guys think early smoking starts? Who said 12? Okay, you should get up here. Yeah, 12. So it'd be like Cambry lighting up, that's what it is. 12 years old, early smoking. So you can see from on the side 0 to 4 ACEs, this is all color coded to kind of show early smoking initiation. The more ACEs you have, the greater the likelihood that you start smoking when you're younger. And then if you're smoking when you're young, you're most likely a current smoker. And then if you look on the far side, then you develop health problems related to that, COPD. So the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to start these difficulties, these problem behaviors when you're younger and carry them through, and then that leads obviously to health concerns. And what's interesting is this study was done in the 90s. Well, in the 90s, we knew that smoking caused lung cancer. We knew that it can cause COPD. We knew that it wasn't good for you. But nicotine helps reduce anxiety, helps reduce depression. And so kids who were dealing with some of these traumatic events needed that coping skill. And so just smoking to reduce that anxiety was much help them, even knowing that it could have a negative outcome. So what we need to focus in on is like identifying that these kids are desperate. They need a coping strategy. What can we do to help them so they don't turn to that and then have this. What they also found is there's this intergenerational transmission of ACEs. And it happens in a lot of different ways, but this is one example. So the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to drink alcohol and become addicted. But what's more interesting is the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to marry an alcoholic. So what does that do for your kids? It means that they grew up with an ACE, right? Because they're in a household where there's substance abuse. And so then there's this intertransmission between generations of ACEs. So it's something that kind of continues, and that's why we need to pay attention to this so that we can help stop this cycle. And, we're a church. We have people who come here who are struggling with addiction, struggling with all kinds of things. And so kind of understanding maybe where this happened, how this might have happened, can help us, help support them as they're moving through. This also just shows the connection between ACEs and mental health as it relates to depression. So the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to struggle with depression. It doesn't mean that if you have an ACE or you have 4 ACEs or 5 ACEs that you're going to marry an alcoholic or smoke or, struggle with depression. That's not it at all. This is just some results from the study that show that this happens. What's interesting here, though, if you can see women are the light blue and men are the dark blue, what's the difference there? Like, why are women so much more, it seems like they're so much more depressed than men? Why would that be? Can you say it again? They're the ones that get nurtured, yeah. They admit it. Yeah, they admit it. They're the ones that maybe go get help. For a man to say, I'm depressed, I'm struggling, there's that stigma. And so these are people that are diagnosed. So there's a lot of people who are undiagnosed, so these numbers are probably actually a lot higher. So this is just a list of some examples of ACE attributable health problems. I don't have to go through them all, but you can kind of see that these are serious things that happen as a result of an ACE when kids are young. And this, Mike, you probably have seen this, a population attributable risk, which is something that epidemiologists do. It's a study or a formula that they use to kind of look at the risk or the potential for risk for certain health problems. So this is called an oil slick. So the middle part that looks kind of black, that's like the oil slick, right? So if you look, there's each kind of piece or section, and then the oil slick, there's a number there for each section. And what they're thinking is, if we could get rid of ACEs completely, we could get rid of that percentage of cases of that whatever concern it is. So like, for example, cancer. If we could get rid of ACEs, they think we could get rid of 24% of the cases of cancer. If we could get rid of ACEs, we could get rid of 26% of people who have cardiovascular disease. If we get rid of ACEs, 65% of alcoholism, 41% of chronic depression. So that's why this is really important. If we can get rid of this, we can change health outcomes, we can change a lot of things for adults. So this is not part of the presentation, but something I wanted to put in there, and I just cut and pasted some pictures. There's this interactive website. It's Veto Violence, and it's on CDC. So if you guys are like, oh, I really am interested in this, you can go to this website, and you can kind of scroll down, and they'll have this picture here. So on the right side, which you guys cannot read, are all of the behaviors and potential medical and health outcomes that are color-coded, and then you can kind of see all these little dots scattered everywhere. So these are all health outcomes that happen to people as an adult. We all have a risk for them, just because we're human. But if you look on the bottom, there's that scale 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you guys see that okay? No, it's a little bit hard to see. So this is kind of where we're at. We all have the potential for health outcomes. But if we look and we say, okay, we're going to move that bottom number. So the slide, the picture on the left is just one ACE happens. You can kind of see how some of the bubbles get a little bit bigger. But the picture on the right-hand side is what happens when we have 4 or more ACEs. I mean, look how huge some of those circles are. That green one is suicide. So if we, the risk for suicide, so these are huge things that we as a church should be aware of, because these are real-life health problems that like 2/3 of our population deal with. And then they're at risk for greater health concerns and greater health outcomes. So that's heavy, right? That's a lot to kind of take in. It kind of weighs you down. You're like, oh my gosh, this is like doom and gloom. But there's hope, and we have a choice to kind of help and make a difference and make a positive impact. And we know we have the Lord, and we can pray, and that is huge. And there's also these core protective systems. And so that's what I was talking about this morning, that, they did this ACE study, they did this research, and what they found is there are some things that make people really resilient. So even if they had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ACEs, for some reason they don't have these health outcomes. They're not struggling with mental health concerns. And so they're looking at like what was happening in that child's life that made an impact, that really had a huge difference. And it's these 3 core protective factors that the church can offer, that we already offer. So when you do these things for a child, even if you don't know if they're experiencing an ACE, you're making a huge impact on their life. It's going to impact their, health outcomes as an adult. So the first one is just relationships with a caring, competent adult who can help guide them, who helps build them up. It's a safe relationship. It's positive. So that's number one. So relationships are huge, and so that's why, having small groups, connecting people into church, making sure that, you have somebody who greets them and then builds that relationship is huge. The next one is individual capabilities, so building our kids up, helping them understand that they have value, they have worth, they're loved, they have potential, God can use them, they have self-efficacy, what they do matters. That's huge. So having that positive view and value and instilling that in our kids is important. And then community. So that's what the church offers, this spirituality, this faith. That's part of, helping people thrive, and the church offers that. So things that we discovered like in the 90s, in the, kind of when millennium, this stuff has been taking place in the church for years, and so thousands of years. And so we offer these core protective factors for people who are struggling, and we can make a huge difference. And so I just want to really encourage and empower the church that no matter what happens, if we are offering these core protective factors, we can change, we can rewire people's brain. So, we looked at, a couple slides back about how, our brain goes through an arborization and a pruning process, but we can rewire kids' brains with these core protective factors that we can offer through the church. And so I just wanted to encourage us to continue to keep moving forward. So that was a 2-hour presentation in like a nutshell. So just because I know for sake of time, I just want to kind of put that out there. But now that you know that information, we have to think about, okay, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to use this information and move forward? How can we create these environments where people feel connected? And I think our church does a great job of that. But just think how you can be responsive in the church to help, help kids, help adults, work through some of these things. Okay, the other thing I'm going to offer you is, if you want, nobody has to do this, I have copies of this ACE survey, and you're welcome to take it. If you're like, I wonder if any of these things happen to me, you can check it out. I'm going to put these down here. So if you want to take one home and think about it. So what you do is, this is an ACE survey. This isn't what they used in the study, but it kind of breaks down the 10 ACEs and asks you if this happened to you. So it's a yes or a no. If it's a yes, it's a 1. It doesn't matter how many times it happened to you. It doesn't matter the severity. So frequency and severity does not matter. So let's say, my mom's sitting here, so now she's, so let's say I was physically abused 20 times. It doesn't mean I get 20 ACEs. I get 1. I get it. But, that's 1 ACE, okay? Because frequency doesn't matter. If you were physically abused, that's 1 ACE. If you lived in the home of somebody who abused substances, that's 2 ACEs, okay? Does that make sense? So frequency, intensity doesn't matter. So you can fill this out. You can see your ACE score. It'll be between 1 and 10. And that kind of helps you. So I will warn you that sometimes you go through this and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I thought things were pretty good. I'm a pretty functional adult. I had no idea I had all these things happen to me. And it can be a lot to process. And so I just want you to kind of take this with caution, if you're interested, because it can open up a lot of doors, and I want to make sure you feel supported if you are going to do that. When I do this in school, we talk about our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program, or we have counselors available to help people if they need to process through, because inevitably we always have somebody who's like, I need to talk after this. So that's the ACE survey. But on the back is this resiliency quiz. And so you can go through this and you can kind of look at, I believe my mother loved me when I was little, from definitely true to definitely not true. So you can kind of see some of these resiliency factors that help support you no matter how many ACEs you have had, and then obviously God is the biggest resiliency factor in here. So I'll leave this here. If you're interested in taking the survey, come grab one, and I'll leave them with Stephanie if you want them later. Okay, so just something for you. So that's the ACE study, okay? Now I want to talk about trauma, because trauma is more than ACEs. So ACEs are these 10 things, remember, that happen to us, but trauma is so much more. So trauma can be defined as an experience that causes intense physical and psychological stress reactions that can have a lasting adverse impact on one's social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So that's what trauma is. So it's beyond the ACEs. It's things that happen that maybe we can or cannot control, and it can really happen at any point in our lives. So there's different types of trauma, 3 main types: natural, like a tornado, an earthquake, something like that; an accident or technological catastrophe; or intentional, so arson, terrorism, domestic violence. Some of our ACEs would fall under this category. So when we talk about trauma, there are certain things that impact how much trauma will impact us, the severity of the event. So how close to home was it? How massive was it? How many people did it impact? The proximity of the event. Was I there when it happened? Did I see it? Did I hear about it? Am I seeing it on the news a bunch? Our caregivers' reactions. So kids look to adults for their cues on how they respond. So what are our caregivers' reactions to the event? Are they really struggling? Because that cues the child that this might be something bigger than what they're realizing. Prior history. So has somebody, even an adult, experienced a lot of trauma? Or is this the only thing that's taken place? Family, and then culture and community, spiritual support, church. Are they connected somewhere? Those are risk and protective factors that can help a person and impacts their response to a traumatic event. So why focus on this at church? Why are we talking about ACEs? Why are we talking about trauma at church? Well, because we can meet needs of people who come to our church. You know, we want everybody to come. God wants everybody to come, and we're human, and we come with lots of things. And so we want to make sure we can meet the needs and be the hands and feet of Jesus. And we know that ACEs are pretty common. It impacts 2/3 of us, and that didn't even touch on trauma. So if we were to include trauma, that impacts so many more people. So it's a common experience that people are walking through the doors every week with. And so how can we meet that need? How can we help people move forward, be resilient, kind of weather those storms that come in life? And trauma exasperates, and it perpetuates mental illness concerns. And so we want to make sure that we're helping support people. After a traumatic event, one of the most important things that can happen is that somebody has somebody else to process that with right away. And so if we are a church and we know a brother or sister in Christ is struggling, we want to make sure we have somebody there right away to help them process through that trauma, because that is a huge resiliency factor. And when we are a church, when we're a safe place where people can come, they can lay their burdens down, they can talk, they can get help with whatever they're dealing with, then we have an improved church climate. People feel safe here. It impacts, attendance, all kinds of things. And it helps build resilience and helps draw people closer to God. So how can we respond? Some of these things are huge. I know the Nazarene Church has a crisis response team that goes. If there's a hurricane or something, we send people to go help support that. And that's huge. But there's things that we can do right here all the time. So we can connect, we can focus on relationships, we can promote safety and trustworthiness, and then respect people's decisions, help them engage in choices, help them collaborate with other people. We can redirect if we need to, encourage and skill building, and then we want to avoid retriggering. And retriggering would be after a traumatic event, sometimes there's things in an environment that can set people back, or they hear something and it reminds them of the sound of the car crashing, and so they're immediately back at that scene. So how can we make sure that this is a calm place where people can come and feel safe and avoid those retriggering? And then prayer. That's huge. So that's the number one way we can respond to trauma. And then I kind of listed this out under the 3 core protective factors with capabilities, attachment and belonging, and community and spirituality, and just named some like really practical things. So when we talk about capabilities, you know, we have the hope in Christ. God has a plan for us. He's given us gifts. We can build that up and help people kind of see their gifts through traumatic events. But also, when you come alongside somebody and you're encouraging them, they can hopefully see, you can hopefully bring out things that they don't necessarily see in themselves when they're going through it. And then I would just, you know, as people are going through really rough time, it helps if we're just compassionate and patient and be with them rather than like, you just need to try harder and you can get through this. Like, just remember that that's important when we're talking about capabilities. The other thing we can do is help people make sure they're attached and they feel like they belong. Maybe it's mentoring, you know, a new couple that's coming to church, or a family who just went through a really rough divorce or a rough car accident or got a really rough diagnosis. And just making sure that we have competent, caring adults who are supporting all the members of our church family. And then, of course, community, culture, and spirituality. It's just investing in future generations, empowering them, praying with our brothers and sisters in Christ is huge. These are, you know, when we talked about the different areas that trauma can impact us, emotional, relational, physical, and control, these are some things that we can do, and this is a lot more geared for our younger kids, especially like downstairs. I know Trina's down there with them. But when we have people who are just struggling emotionally and having this emotional response, they need regulation. And so there's a list of strategies we can do, do with somebody. Prayer, recognize, respond, maybe go for a walk with them. I know that sounds really simple, but that active movement is really helpful. Maybe go through some breathing exercises, and then just have somebody there that can process and discuss with them. If relational, people who are dealing with trauma need relationship, need a safe person who they can talk to, who's going to be there. And if you're like, I'm not really sure how to build a relationship with somebody, you know, like I just see them kind of, you know, at church, you know, once, you know, every week, and it's really hard. So I would just encourage you to, you know, offer words of encouragement. You know, maybe connect with them, send them an email or a Facebook message just to let them know you're thinking about them. Those are really basic things. But what we do, like in the school setting, we say there's this 2x10 strategy. So you talk to a kid for 2 minutes a day for 10 days in a row to kind of build this up. And it's not about school, so it wouldn't be about church or anything like that. It's just about, hey, what's going on? Tell me about what you like. You're just trying to invest in them and learn more about them. And then you have this relationship that's safe, and then you can kind of work, you know, go a little bit deeper. Maybe we need to meet basic needs. I know we have the food pantry downstairs. We have the baby room. So those are some excellent ways that we can meet the needs of people who are going through a traumatic situation. And then know that people, when we talk about control needs, people have a choice. We have a free will on what we're going to do. And so making sure that we're helping people like see potential options, help them work through whatever they're dealing with, to see all the different options that might be on the table of what they can do to kind of work through some of the support. That's helpful. So when you do respond to trauma or traumatic events, you know, in Indiana, everybody's a mandated reporter. So if you suspect abuse or neglect, obviously, we want to make a report to the Child Protective Services. But if you are dealing with somebody who has a traumatic event that they've endured, you know, maybe a car accident, maybe a really hard diagnosis, maybe, you know, you talk with them and you learn that they have all this abuse in their history, and you're not sure what to say, it's okay. You don't have to be like their therapist. You can be their friend and just say, I know this is really hard. I'm here with you. That's it. That you don't have to say something to make it better, to make it go away. None of us can do that, but you just want them to know, like, you're here, you're going to be here with them, you care, and you want to be supportive. And then just have that helpful response. And you know, if they want, ask them if you can pray with them and kind of go from there. Those are simple things that we can all do. And so that kind of leads us to this, you know, the whole idea of us being like a palm tree. And this is the verse that we use this morning, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree from Psalms. And I love that because, you know, we are like palm trees in these storms of life. Trauma happens. ACEs might have happened to us. And these storms of life can beat down on us. And they can bend us, but we don't have to break if we have some resiliency factors in place. So we have prayer. And what's interesting about a palm tree is, you know, there's some things in our life that can be like a palm. Not only can we be resilient and kind of bend in the storm, but palm trees also are stronger when they're with other palm trees. So when you're with other people, you can be stronger together because you can kind of bear some of that load. The other thing that is interesting about palm trees, if they're planted with different shrubs around them, so some diversity in their lives, it makes them stronger. And so I encourage you to seek out different perspectives, diverse perspectives. That helps people, you know, through traumatic events as well. So a palm tree, you know, the verse, the analogy is something that we can all use, especially when we're going through storms of life. And that might be it. Okay, so that's it. So 2 hours and I don't know, how long did it take? 45 minutes, not bad at all. Plus I added another presentation that always takes me an hour. So I just want to kind of go through it quickly so that we could have an understanding of some things that might have happened to us, you know, and that impacts our mental health, our behavior, maybe explain some things in people that we know. And then also help us understand that trauma happens to all of us and that there are things that we can do as a church to help support one another through these really difficult times. So there's a lot more to go way into depth, but I just wanted to kind of keep it at less than an hour because we have a giveaway to give. And then, and then we have another presentation coming up just on some regulation strategies. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the giveaway.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. We also do have some snacks and coffee, so we'll do one more giveaway here with the gift baskets, and then we'll take about a 10-minute break. Is that all right? So if you want to get coffee and use the restroom, you can do that, and then we'll finish up in here. So I was going to just let you know, too, the baskets, they have a book in there. Jenny had actually recommended this book. It's called Try Softer. And if you don't win a copy of it, we're going to keep some copies on hand in the library, too, as well. So if you'd like to check one out, we want to encourage you to do that. There's a coffee mug in there, some pins. There's a piece of art that Stephanie, I think, painted, something like that, too, as well. It's supposed to be calming. I wanted Darth Vader, but she didn't think that was too calming, so we went a different route. But we're excited to give those away. So, Carla? All right. We have 829737. Oh, Jenny, that's your mom? So, yeah. Okay. Maybe I should have Melissa draw one. Melissa, you want to draw one? Yeah. Okay, we have 829721. Is it really? Oh, man. Well, cool. All right, so we'll take just a short break here. And like I said, please help yourself to some of the coffee and snacks out there and come back here.